It's insufficient to just know that, oh yeah, the ruling class are using Marxist ideas, because that doesn't tell you what they're going to do next. It doesn't tell you anything about those ideas. Like Klaus Schwab, is he a communist or what? It's like, well, no, he's not a communist if you want to use definitions. But if people mean that he's a Marxian or that he uses a lot of Marxian analysis, then that would be correct. But that doesn't inform you what Marxian analysis is. So that doesn't tell you what they're really thinking or what they're going to do next.
Enjoy episode 1 of How the Elites Understand and Use Power with Xoaquin Flores right here on ESW.
Morning, everybody. Cowboy here, and I've got one of my favorite guests on, Xoaquin Flores. You can find his work over on Telegram at The New Resistance. That's correct, right? The New Resistance?
New Resistance.
Just New Resistance. Okay,
yeah.
At New Resistance over on Telegram. And we also have a freebie for you. I've got a free algo in the description. You get to see me put it together. You get to see me turn it into code. And you get to see the tools that traders use to connect that algo to their brokerage so they can trade without being there once they have optimized the algo. So we got a really cool series. We're starting a series. And this will be a relatively short show today. We're going to do an introduction to what may end up unfolding to who knows how many videos. Whenever I've got a chance to have the brain of Xoaquin Flores here on this show, it's just it's a real pleasure. And we had a conversation after our prior show. It unfolded into a conversation about the managerial revolution, and it's a part of history that it was something that I had missed. Right, I was unaware of that. And so we kind of ventured onto some new territory. And Xoaquin, can you kind of give us an idea of where we went with all that?
Yeah, we were talking about really, the paradigms of the elite and or the ruling class. And I would say ruling class. There's terminological stuff. It's super interesting because all across today's political spectrum, left, right, and then all these syncretisms and neo movements. There's some words kind of have different meaning and different, and we try to arrive at a dictionary in the first place that actually is coherent, and you have ruling class, you have the owning class, you have the elites, but you are, is a Hall of Fame baseball player an elite? Well, he's an elite baseball player, but that's not what we mean. We're talking about often financial, technological, financial, monetary, people with the most money and power go hand in hand. But, would you consider, 4-star generals to be among the elites? That's what's going on. But I would just say that we're talking about ideologies of the elite or the ruling class and the applied science. And the managerial revolution is like a big thing that happened. Like if you were to say in time, you would say about starting around 110 years ago, but you could say 100 years ago, right? And we need to learn their vocabulary and to know their references to understand what they think, and this is like the theories or hypotheses of Karl Marx have very interestingly bled in and been considered and become part of ruling class thinking. And it's insufficient, to paraphrase Klaus Schwab, it is insufficient. It's insufficient to just know that, oh yeah, the ruling class are using Marxist ideas. It's insufficient because that doesn't tell you what they're going to do next. It doesn't tell you anything about those ideas.
It's almost like, not that we're in a debate of any kind here, but anytime you want to start a conversation, you have to have the definitions. Then the same goes with a contract. I wasn't a lawyer, but I did a fair amount of contract law in the insurance business, and you always start with the definitions. So I think it's a good idea to kind of get those out of the way so we even know what we're talking about, right?
Yeah, you have to know what you're talking about. There's left-wing populism and right-wing populism. And within those discourses, they vulgarize the terms. Or, like Klaus Schwab, is he a communist? Or what? It's like, well, no, he's not a communist if you want to use definitions. But if people mean that he's a Marxian or that he uses a lot of Marxian analysis, then that would be correct, right? But that doesn't inform you what Marxian analysis is. So that doesn't tell you what they're really thinking or what they're going to do next. It's too simple to be like, oh, they want to take your property. Well, maybe they do and maybe they don't. There's different, maybe they want to make a party state. Maybe private property stays in place, but you need to have a high social credit score. I mean, there's so many ways it could go. You have to understand not just that there's a label for it, but you have to understand what they're thinking and why. You know, if you're planning a fucking exit strategy, if you're, whatever you're doing, if you want, whether you play the game or don't play the game, you're still playing the game. So you have to know what they're thinking and why they're thinking it. And to the extent that the ideas of Karl Marx have influenced their thinking, doesn't tell you anything about those ideas. And then you have, what are those ideas all about? And what are they talking about with globalization or being a globalist? Or what are they talking about AI and the end of manual labor? Like, this is a huge thing on everyone's minds, is the end of work. So what are they talking about with the fourth industrial revolution? Like, what the hell is this stuff? And for as much as you might find some gems out there and some good analysis, you have a lot of junk. And we're trying to like eliminate the junk, Nick. We're trying to eliminate the things. We want to weed through the shit and understand what's going on. So the managerial revolution is like simple to understand when you understand Marx's ideas. And I think the first thing that people want to understand from this is that there's a difference between descriptive and proscriptive.
Now, before we get too far, I just want to interject. Anybody who thinks that, Howard Lutnick went and said that globalism is over and all this, and you think that what we're talking about doesn't apply, I would caution you in two different ways. First of all, the current administration may well not be in power in the next few years, and they can just jump right back into the WEF and push all the globalism again. That can happen. Secondly, even if the WEF is depowered and Howard Lutnick and et cetera are correct, it doesn't mean this is not going on elsewhere. And then I guess the third bit I would say is that we're not here promoting any ideologies. We just have to understand how they're thinking. So when we're talking about like, understand it. Like Marxian, people sometimes they
to understand you're saying, the Trump project can fail, and what are they really? What he's saying is independent of what's happening, because that's why I was going to say there's a difference between proscriptive and descriptive, and the ruling class understands the descriptive, the descriptive power of Marxian analysis. That's why they use it, and a lot of people confuse that for proscriptive. There are proscriptive things that people are right to be against, but the descriptive part is going to remain because the descriptive part pertains to historical events and historical developments, like the managerial revolution. So once people get that okay, there's a difference between talking about what we should do versus talking about what is the story going back? Like what is the situation right now? And why in the structuralist school or the so-called Frankfurt School, critical theory, how has that been so influential? That's still a paradigm in contemporary thought. So it's still driving a lot. And even if the Trump project succeeds and we're like in a nationalist and or spheres of influence or multipolarity, the Marxian analysis is still baked into elite thinking. Like, institutions don't stop having an influence on all the people who went through them.
Yeah, that's pretty That's pretty profound, right? Like these people think in much longer terms than the 4 years that we consider here, right? So this is why I caution people not to think that what we're talking about today is obsolete. We do, like I said, this is going to be a part of a series,
Yeah.
and so if you were to give a primer, like the first part, or let's just say either I don't want to say a Rosetta Stone because that's too broad, but just kind of the first key, maybe of that of the descriptive aspect. Where would you start?
What they look at is they go back hundreds of years, and they say, what has been the impact on thinking and on belief systems and on what life looks like of big advances in applied technology. And so they have this broken up into what are called industrial revolutions. A lot of people, maybe if you were paying attention in school or if you have an interest in the subject, you might know about the Industrial Revolution. But now they've really gotten this into like four. And they're saying that we are either in or on the precipice of the fourth. But this goes back to this idea of the first industrial revolution, the second, and the third. And this is so Marx didn't use these words, but this is a Marxian framework, right? And it's hard it has a lot of utility. In other words, well, think about investment algorithms, right? This is an objective science. It's an art. It's pattern recognition and art, but it's a science. It's a technique. And just because the big banking houses have their super algorithms and their, microsecond volume trading, doesn't mean that, understanding that they do it doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it as an individual or understand it as an individual and can apply those in your life. And likewise, it doesn't, Marxian analysis and communism are like two different things. One does not lead to the other. You can use Marxian analysis as part of the ruling class to keep the private property system intact, actually. So a lot of things might be counterintuitive to someone first listening. So I would say, like, as a primer, it's about applied technologies and scale over time. So like the invention of the steam engine was they would say the beginning of the first industrial revolution, right? The invention of the internal combustion engine is like the second. Electricity comes along somewhere between the first and the second and has the strongest impact on the second. The third industrial revolution is the computers and information technology. And so then how we got to, like, Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum and all of this is an interesting story, but it's really to understand the managerial revolution. And there are figures like Taylor and the idea of scientific management. And then later you would have Drucker, and Drucker would introduce understanding about interactive management, management of goals as opposed to management of people. You have theory X and theory Y, which comes along in the post-Drucker paradigm. But one of the big problems that elite ruling class have had to deal with is, from the perspective of those people, it's a war of all against all. So now we might characterize that in terms of the free market or something. Like we might say, okay, well, this company and these owners and these CEOs see things going this way, and they start investing in this industry or this part of the world or this way of doing things, which is going to depend upon a geopolitical paradigm, a legal paradigm, a regulatory paradigm, and a technological paradigm, right? Another competing elite, maybe even an adjacent arena, but maybe they're hedging, or their gambit is all in on an alternative, either a different part of the world, right? Like if, let's say you're in the United States and Group A is like, we're investing in, semiconductors in Europe, and other people are like, we're investing in semiconductors in Taiwan, right? Now, of course, the same company could do both, but we're talking about competing interests, and we're just giving examples so people can wrap their heads around it. And so the biggest problem is that when a country reaches a certain power capacity and it has hegemonic influence on different regions of the world, all the different members of the ruling class are not equally invested in all these different corners of the empire, if you want to think geographically the same way. Nor are they invested in the same technologies, nor are they invested in the same paradigms. Does that make sense? Yeah. So
this is interesting.
Yeah.
So when you have a country that's just say has outsized power, right? A hegemonic power, that's I wanted you to kind of say that again, because I was trying to grasp it. You have a certain country, their capabilities exceed everybody else's, and you're saying that, is it that like all of the elites are not equally invested? Like if you,
there's disparity. I mean, if we're going to label it, really to understand this introduction is understanding how the ruling class thinks and how they are able to maintain coherence or cohesiveness, despite that really, as individuals, they're very ego driven. That's on a personal psychological level. Then in terms of their actual skin in game, they're very diverse in their investments. So this can actually pull them apart, right?
So are we imagining the ruling class in this case to sort of be not a cohesive group, but a group that all talks to each other despite whichever country or region they're from, and they're all trying to kind of make things work in an active sense, or is it just more of the result of the way the economies work in the world?
It's both. I mean, you can be looking at elites even of a single country. When that country reaches a certain degree of power projection, then that national elite or ruling class is actually going to be invested in different parts of the world. But those individual members of the ruling class are going to be invested differently in different parts of the world. I'm speaking geographically, but this can also pertain to industries, technologies, and other paradigms.
Understood.
So there's geographic, technological. Like think about Apple, for example. Like they failed to develop their own large language module. That's been the huge thing. Like they kind of came out early with, what was it called? Siri. But that's that's kind of overstated the capacity.
Yeah. It's not really, I don't think it's an LLM as much as it is just a search engine that hears your voice.
It's a search engine that hears your voice. And they kept promising that they were going to, they even did like promos and I guess trailers or whatever of their next generation. And then they basically pulled off of it, right? So think about, for example, the people who control Apple versus, Sam Altman or somebody like that, right? So now Apple's going to need to get one of these LLM companies integrated in their next product, but they don't have it anymore. It's not their own, right? So anyway, elites can get pulled apart through this. Then you have
the same happened with Bill Gates and the cellular revolution. So Bill Gates and his company didn't really have a solid foothold in the cellular phone kind of revolution, and so they had to integrate into other models as well.
That's so interesting. Yeah, I mean, I remember when BlackBerry was out, and there was always people that wanted to run a different operating system on a BlackBerry, and then finally, when the Android came out in its similar to present form, like the first version of it, it was like a huge leap for a lot of people. It's a great example. You have But you think about lithium, for example, and how that's driving batteries for electric and things like this. So anyway, think about how the, gasoline, the oil industry, how they're at odds with the electric car, for example. Now you can use regulations and government incentives to then get the auto industry or something to do electric cars. You saw what happened with like Chevrolet, not very good. So you have a lot of problems. The point is that if you have the foresight to know that you're going to launch big on the world stage, and if you understand that it's actually the material reality combined with human nature that pulls elites apart. Like there's nothing, there's really, even though they can be exacerbated intentionally, at its core foundation and as a concept for people to understand, the natural tendency is that elites, even of a given polity or country, are going to get pulled in different directions. And the more powerful and more influential the whole country is, the more the elites will be pulled apart. Right?
Yeah, I would say that just knowing the little the bit that I know about economics is when there are a lot more pies out there, then, for example, if you're in a country that doesn't have a lot of power, then everybody is just trying to run the same few games that there are to run, so you're all kind of working together to keep the ship afloat, right?
That's right.
But if there's a lot more, I mean, you could
think about economic complexity index of a country. An underdeveloped country has a lower economic complexity index, and that allows a fewer number of elites to have more shared common interests, and that fewer number of elites or that smaller ruling class can have their fingers in different pies and there still be coherency. And the low level of development of those industries requires a lower level of expertise and knowledge, et cetera, which means that it's actually possible for it to be managed, for you to have a more coherent management. So the more that your complexity index in your society grows, the more power that you're building, that tends to correlate. I mean, the driving questions are separate, but that correlates with greater footprint globally in terms of your hegemony. So now you're getting pulled apart. And this goes back thousands of years. This is not a new thing. This tells the story of divisions and civil wars in the Roman Empire, Persian Empire, Ottoman Empire, and so forth, right? So this is not a new thing. We're actually looking at human patterns throughout time. I think and the ruling class are good at understanding the history of their class and the history of power. Like a lot of biographies are studied, but also social history, right? So an error is people that focus too heavily on biographies. Well, there's a trade-off. You're going to get maybe good habits. Like you might learn good work habits or good mindset from reading people's biographies, but you're not going to understand the paradigm, right? That's where like sociology and history come in, separate from biographies. Even though in biographies you're going to have history, understanding the flow and action, like the mechanism of history, is different from biographies. Like if you think in terms of games, like a first-person shooter is different from a grand strategy map game. And the ruling class thinks in both terms. They have that first-person shooter outlook. That's the ego. That's their interest. That's their game. But they look in terms of broad history and tendencies and trends over time, understanding the mechanisms of history and power. That's your grand strategy type game. So,
well, it certainly flies in the face of kind of what a lot of people will say, that our leaders are dumb and they don't know anything. And it seems to me
that's a liberal criticism of power. That's a liberal criticism of power that actually is based in flattery. It's a propaganda that those who are saying it are flattering the ears of the audience. Like they're saying, like, you are more competent than the people in power, which is kind of funny because they're in power and you're not. So right. It's like we should.
Proof is not exactly in the pudding on that one.
Well, the proof is not exactly in the pudding with that one, bro. I think maybe in the early 20th century, 19th to 18th century, literature might have tended to over exaggerate the brilliance of certain popes, kings, and so forth. Like I get that. So maybe there was a response that went too hard the other way, which rises with the French and American revolutions, liberal paradigm and liberal criticisms of power, which is, in fact, they're being incompetent, but it's actually they're not as much incompetent as you have misidentified their goals. Like just because they lie and say, oh, the goal is peace, and they wind up with war, doesn't mean they're stupid. It might mean they're evil. It might mean they're warlike, but their goal was war, typically. Just because they sold you peace and didn't achieve peace doesn't mean they are incompetent at achieving peace. It meant they had an ulterior motive that actually you were stupid. They lied to you. So
yeah, they can pull a Columbo.
People want to be vindicated. Say what?
No, I ran over you. What did you say?
People want to be vindicated. They don't want to think of themselves as having been fooled. It's like Mark Twain, said, it's much easier to fool somebody than to convince them that they've been fooled.
Yeah, I've even had to turn that on myself from time to time, But what I was thinking is, as far as that liberal critique of power, I think a lot of times that could be also turned against the populace in a very Columbo type way, where he just, Columbo, if you remember the show, like from the 80s and 70s, he just pretend to be an idiot and he'd come back, he'd cross one eye, just one more thing,
Right.
Just that last question.
That was a very good Columbo impression, by the way.
Thank you. I don't think I've seen that show since the early 80s, but either way, it does seem like a nice weapon they could also have in their quiver.
Yes, and it's a lot of the things that they're doing are not errors, and there's probably like honestly, you could spitball, you could board it out, you could probably figure out improvements of it or things that actually, in a broader paradigmatic sense, are visionary and next paradigm. Like critics are capable of this. Don't get me wrong. Like people are capable of this. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying a lot of people misapprehend what the point or the goal of the elites is. And liberal criticism tends to take at face value what their stated aims are and then point to the divergence between outcomes and stated aims. And what we're saying is that it's a feature, not a bug.
Right. Yeah. Stated aims are not necessarily the actual aims.
Yeah.
So you had, I know you wanted to, we have about 3 minutes left on the original kind of time frame for this show. Although if you care to go a little bit longer, I'll certainly game for that.
Sure. So what I hope people will stick around for the series is we're going to be talking about the influence of Nazism, fascism, and communism in terms of Marxism on elite strategies and thinking today. And again, this is not, we don't want to come away with either thinking that these are good ideas or that they were avoidable. Like there's a nuance in here. Like we're going to learn what they think, and then you're going to, along the way, learn actually what are the functional truths in there that might be disturbing, but are ultimately going to be liberating, because you'll be prepared, you'll understand what to expect and what they're doing. So this is not financial advice, but if you're an investor or if you're a survivor or whatever, you're an activist, whatever you're trying to do, you will better understand their next moves and what to expect, whether it's markets, politics, etc., from this series. So that's what I hope people are able to, look forward to.
Well, no, that's huge because, excuse me, with a lot of what's going on lately, you got the news is absolutely polluted with, Epstein files and Iran and this and that and the other. And while I'm not discounting all that stuff completely, I whether it's real or not, whether all of it's real, some of it's real, I think a lot of it's a distraction. And I think a lot of it is a demoralization campaign.
Yes.
And so one of that's the greatest way that you can just take over people is to completely demoralize them. And I think that it's helpful for us to even understand that might be what's going on, talking about understanding how they think and so on and so forth. And historically at Rogue, while we certainly will critique what's happening, we are very interested in helping people survive, and prosper even in these times. So this is going to fit really well, I think, into what we're doing. And I'm very excited to be doing this with you. Yeah.
That was the old prosper. Yeah. What was his slogan? It was something prosper.
Live long and prosper.
Live long and prosper. Yeah. I just remember in school, not all kids could do this, but
But can we do this though? Where, like, one
I know
finger goes over?
some paranoiac out there is going to be like, "Oh, dude, they're throwing Illuminati signs."
Yeah.
Anyway, guys, all I want. But
Don't watch us. If you're that kind of person, just unsubscribe, please.
Yeah, I would just say what we're going to get into is a lot of the connections. We're going to understand what Nazism actually was from the perspective of organizational or managerial technology or managerial science. And then we're going to understand what the CIA imported from the Nazis and how the American system was re-understood among the elites, and then really where a lot of this Epstein stuff actually comes from. And I think what people will appreciate from this in the end, and what they're going to learn also, is that the Epstein compromise stuff was a fail-safe scenario, but that wasn't the main point. The main point was cultivating this in-group cohesion among the ruling class around the things, the interests that they do share, which are ego-driven, instead of those things having them drift apart. And now what keeps them from drifting apart in the final threat is the compromise. Right? But that's not the main mechanism. Like, these people voluntarily want to do this stuff. They weren't like forced to make compromise, and they feel included. And Epstein had a tremendous ability to make people feel important, special, and make people feel included. And what you're going to understand from this in the end is that the Nazis developed something that was unique for its time, that was influenced by Bolshevism, but also influenced by the occult. There's very little influence of the occult in Bolshevism, for example. The occult stuff is all in Nazism. And they did something different from the Bolsheviks, although there was a strong inspiration in some way. But it was also very unique because it deals into Western esotericism. We're going to get into Scientology. We're going to get into Aleister Crowley. We're going to get into the managerial, multi-level marketing type groups that came out of that, whether it's EST or the Forum. And you have experience with some of this. I have experience with the communist left pretty intensely in my origin story. And I think our conversation is going to be, I think people are going to get into it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And again, I think one of the key things is that this kind of information might be disturbing to some. And one thing that I've understood over my life is that if I'm not being disturbed, a lot of times I'm not learning, right? Like,
right.
There, you need to have your reality shaken up a little bit, but we're not here to like say, oh, this is good or this is bad. We're just pointing out kind of what is, right, and what's going on, and whether or not you understanding this can help you. That's the thing that I would put forth.
And I think as we develop the series, there will be some longer episodes, and there'll be, maybe we'll have some graphs or charts or visuals and stuff along the way to help as aids. But it's a super fascinating subject. Folks who know my work know that I've written and talked plenty before about the Fourth Industrial Revolution, the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, the Great Reset, Internet of Things versus Internet for Things. So many interesting things that are actually going to shape the future. And these are things that are AI. These are things that are technological realities that are going to shape the social sphere. That's what you're going to learn from Marxian analysis. And that's going to apply whether it's a globalist or nationalist or multipolar or spheres of influence, like whatever geopolitical arrangement or the social tone of that society, whether it's like more traditional or more liberal, like those are part of all of this and taken into account. But the Marxian analysis is actually still in effect. And when that's not bad news, by the way, because if you learn it, right, then you're going to be prepared. But if you just think it's sufficient to be like, oh, well, that's this group of the ruling class uses Marxism, and that's all I need to know about it. And then that means that the pink-haired, purple-haired, lesbian mafia, that's what that means. Like, no. There's a lot more to untangle. This is embedded in nationalism. This is embedded in developments in the third world. China, like People's Republic, they're not a woke society at all. They're fully driven by Marxian analysis. So you have to understand these things to understand the world. And I'm still learning, and I'm going to be presenting things that I continue. Like, I'm not the fucking master of shit, you know, like these are my perspectives. These are my insights. This is based on my life experience, my writing, and I continue to research and learn things. And I look forward to the conversations that we'll have, bro.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well. I think that the tools and the information that might come from this this course might be far more valuable than a lot of things. So definitely stay tuned. We will be back soon. Don't forget to look in the description at New Resistance over in Telegram. Now, Xoaquin, you're one of the hardest working guys out there. You know, and I know a little of your home life, and we're in a similar position with kids at a certain age and all that. So and the amount of work that you do despite that is actually impressive. The hours and hours that you're on doing live shows in there. So I really recommend going over to that Telegram, checking it out. It's one of the most informed and, quite frankly, fun Telegrams in the space. Thank you for coming with us today. And we will have a new episode out ideally next week. I actually am so excited about this. I literally am running a fever and sweating, and I'm like, I'm not missing this. We're doing this today. So
yeah. I was sick last week, and we should be able to hit these every week, every other week, and may not always be on the same day, but we'll make it happen. And this series is going to be fantastic. So stick around.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, XF. We'll see you soon, bud.
All right, man. See you.